What's up, YouTube? Today's video is the next entry in my console collection series, and today I'm going to be focusing on my collection for the Sega CD. So as usual, I'm going to talk about the hardware I used to play the games first, and the first thing you'll notice is you're not staring at a standard Sega CD 1 or 2 unit combined with the Sega Genesis, as most people would probably use. So this is one of the variants that is capable of playing Sega CD games as well as Genesis games, and this is the JVC X'eye unit, and I really enjoy this. I like it a lot better than the actual combo Sega CD Genesis unit because you can use one power supply to power this. That is like by far the number one advantage, other than just being a more compact unit and having it all in one. To me, it has a lot of parallels with the Turbo Duo system, which is a TurboGrafx chip card system with the CD attachment all built in just like this. This is a really neat unit. They're unfortunately pretty rare, but it does work really well. It has two standard Genesis controller ports on the front, so you just use your normal Genesis controllers. You've got your power and reset button here. Has a top-loading disc tray on the top, so none of the mechanical junk like the Sega CD1 to deal with. And the one thing I like about this versus the Sega CDX system is that apparently the CD unit in this spins a little faster than those do, just what I heard. Other than that, I would say that these are a little bit more reliable also. So if you notice in the cartridge slot here, just fits a standard Genesis cartridge. It also has a square cutout, which will play Sega Mega Drive games, which is very nice, as long as they don't have a lockout chip. And it also has the memory card, or so it was called, the CD backup RAM cart. This allowed you to save games. There was some internal memory in the X'eye, but this will hold a lot more. Some games like Shining Force CD require the entirety of the system onboard memory, so you're pretty much going to need one of these no matter what. But I do like this. It makes it easy to save games. And other things that are cool about the X'eye are just the variety of hookups on the back. I think there was a variant that doesn't have both sets of these. Oh, that's good for it. But this has the standard Sega CD 2 or Sega Genesis 2 input here for AV. It also is fully RGB compatible straight out of the box, so you can just plug an RGB cable into that and you're good to go. And it also has the more standard composite inputs here for just if you just have a standard cable with the 3 inputs versus the specific one for the console. Kind of weird that it had both. I believe this blanked out spot here is where the S-Video hookup that the Japanese Wonder Mega version of this system had, but for cost reasons they took that out of the US version, unfortunately. Here is your AC input, and one thing I will say about the X'eye unit is if you do not get the AC adapter with the unit, I probably wouldn't buy it because it is proprietary to the system and it is very, very hard to find and expensive on its own. You can see some of the original labels on the bottom. And other than that, like I said, that's my hardware. This has served me well for probably about 15 years now. I've had this for quite a while. I bought it used. Unfortunately, didn't get the original box or anything with it, but this is what I use to play my Sega CD games and also my Genesis games, and it works great for both of those. So I do recommend the X'eye unit. So with that said, let's talk about the games that make up my collection for this system. I will go through these pretty quick because there's quite a few. Sega CD games have kind of a reputation as being an FMV system, and I'm hoping one thing I'll get across by this video is showing you that there are some really cool 2D non-FMV games for the system that are exclusive to the system, as well as some cool shooters, some RPGs, and just really an interesting mix of games. So please don't discount the Sega CD. There are some cool things on it. Is it worth owning the entire library? Probably not, but I do think that this collection encompasses a lot of the highlights on the system. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to show you is just a couple of the Packin Games. These did not have the standard Longbox CD cases. They just came in these kind of goofy setups. This was Sewer Shark, and pretty notorious FMV game. It's kind of strange because it came with this oversized manual that doesn't fit in the original dual case that the game shipped with. But that being that, nothing much to say about that one. The other pack-in for some systems was the Soul Feast. This is a shooter. It is also incredibly closely related to Soul Dees on the Sega Genesis, and I just believe it has, I don't know, some FMV intro or something like that. But other than that, pretty much the same game, and not really a mind-blowing shooter for the system. It's okay. So with that said, let's go on to the games that have the more standard long box cases. So most of these are in kind of a Sega Saturn style jewel case. Some of them, though, had paper boxes, so you're going to see kind of a mix of how the cases were sold on the Sega CD. First one of these is The Amazing Spider-Man versus the Kingpin, and pretty cool artwork on the case, but I did play this game. It has some really atrocious video, and the controls are a little suspect on it as well. It's an okay game, don't pay a lot for this one, but definitely not a classic Spider-Man game by any means. Next is one of the exclusive shooters to the system that I do really enjoy. This is Android Assault. This one is a really nice horizontally scrolling shooter that has a standard plane, but then you can upgrade to a mech as you power up in this game. Really long levels, pretty challenging, and you also can control the speed of your ship, which I always do like that feature. Was published by Big Fun Games, which I don't really know much about them. I don't think they did many other games. But very cool game, and I think this one was known in Japan by its subtitle of Barry Arm, or Bari Arm. So yeah, definitely worth picking this one up. It has gone up in price a little bit lately. I had a pretty good challenge in finding this game, but I do think it's worth tracking down. Next is The Adventures of Batman and Robin. I barely have played this at all. I do seem to remember somebody saying that it had like some racing sections that were different than the Genesis game or something like that. I don't know. Looking at the pictures here, it doesn't look anything like the Genesis game. So maybe I should try this one out more. I'm assuming it's probably not that special, so we'll just move on. Next was a game that I really did want. This is Black Hole Assault, and this was a very early paper box game for the system by Big Net. I thought this was going to be a shooter or a mech action game for some reason, but it is actually a mech fighting game. And aside from some very hilarious and poorly translated videos to show the intro and between scene cutscenes, the fighting in this game is absolutely horrible. So good to laugh at, but absolutely not an essential piece of the Sega CD library. Next is Cliffhanger, and I honestly don't even remember why I bought this, so I'm just going to skip by that one pretty quick. This one is Dark Wizard, and this was actually a first-party RPG for the system. I don't really think that this one is known for being that special. I think the story's a little bit bland in it, but it's passable. Like I say, it was a pretty early RPG strategy game for the system, so I don't know. Like I said, not really a legendary RPG for the system, of which there are several. This one is Dragon's Lair. This is the, classic arcade Laserdisc based FMV style game, and I just didn't really own Dragon's Lair on any other system, so I thought the Sega CD would be a representative good copy of that to have. I'm not really a huge fan of Dragon's Lair, so move on from that. This was a somewhat recent pickup. This is Dungeon Explorer. This is a pretty cool Hudson Soft game and hard to get for the system. You didn't really release a whole lot of these, I don't think. Artwork on it is not so hot, I would say. But Dungeon Explorer got its start, I believe, on the TurboGrafx. That's where I first played it. And this is kind of an enhanced version of that. What I would say about Dungeon Explorer is if you like Gauntlet, you probably will like this game. There is a lot of similarity to it with a little bit more storyline and videos. And pretty fun, although it is quite difficult. It does support up to 4 players, much like Gauntlet. It is a 4-player game, so pretty cool stuff. Next is probably one of the all-time classics of the Sega CD, and that is the port of Final Fight for the system. This is Final Fight CD. This also was a paper box game, pretty early release, and I have always really enjoyed this port of this game. If you cannot play the true arcade original, this is probably about as close as you're going to get in a home version, and it blew away stuff like the Super Nintendo version that we got in the US. So definitely a well-recommended game for the system, and soundtrack sounds great on this game as well. This was a very recent find for me. This is Flink, and the reason I wanted this game is it is related to Adventures of Lomax on the Sony PlayStation. Both of these are beautiful hand-drawn 2D games. I did play this one quite a bit. I thought the controls were a little bit weird on it, but other than that, the artwork is beautiful. And European developed, interesting kind of backstory on this one. Some reason it came to the US by Vic Tokai, but Psygnosis was ultimately behind this game. And I don't know, I kind of like the quirky artwork on the front, so I can recommend this one as well if you want something a little different for your Sega CD. Next game is Heimdall, I believe that's how you say that, and barely have played this one at all either. I think it's kind of a isometric strategy game or something like that, action game, I don't know. Can't really tell you a whole lot about it, but pretty common game for the Sega CD and doesn't cost too much. This next game I do not have the original box for, I just have a repro art, but this is Lawnmower Man. For some reason this is one of the more difficult to find Sega CD games, so I just kind of bought it because it was cheap and I knew it wasn't super common. Based on the underwhelming movie, and does not look like anything special, so I probably won't really track down the original case of this. The next couple of games are kind of some of the more popular ones, I would say, for the system, and this was a legendary series that got its start on the Sega CD, and that is the Lunar games, of course. So the first one of these is Lunar the Silver Star. Working Designs published this in the US. Unfortunately, the first game does not have the foil artwork like the second one does, but classic story, really cool artwork, and definitely got the start of a long-running series right here, so very cool that this got released on the Sega CD and Working Designs published it here. Next is the sequel to that, which is Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. This one has slightly better artwork on it, and just a continuation of the story. You can, of course, get the remakes of both of these on the PS1 that I think are probably a little bit better on that version, but, you know, for classic's sake, these are really not, still worth having in your collection as well. Next is some of the FMV light gun games for the system, and that first one of these is Mad Dog McCree. This was originally a Laserdisc arcade game, and hilariously bad video in this. It's worth playing just for the laughs, if nothing else. And there was actually a proprietary light gun that American Laser Games released for the Sega CD. I don't have it, but kind of interesting that that exists too. So these were, of course, live-action arcade games that were set in the Wild Wild West and incredibly cheese factor. Next is the sequel to that, which is Mad Dog 2, The Lost Gold. Basically more of the same, and if you enjoyed the first one, I'm sure you'll enjoy how bad this one is too. Next is one of the few sports games I have in my collection, and that is NBA Hang Time 95. I got this game for $1, and the main reason I bought it was just to use the case for a different game. I got it home and looked it up and found out this is one of the absolute rarest games for the system, so I'm keeping it for that reason. I think it's kind of unusual that this got such a low print run, considering it was a sports game, but by 95 the Sega CD was running out of gas, so I guess I could understand very low, interest in this game by the time it came out. Next is another sports game, and this is NHL 94. I don't know, I'm not a big hockey fan or anything like that, but I would say that of hockey games of this generation, NHL 94 was kind of always known as the best, and I chose for some reason to buy this on the Sega CD versus the more popular Genesis version, so I do have it. Not really something I ever play, though. Next is a game that I bought because the artwork on it was kind of cool. This is Nova Storm, and this is another game by Psygnosis of Europe. I believe this is more of a, I don't know, Star Fox style game, I guess you could say. Not really something I'm totally into, but I do like the artwork on it. It is kind of low quality, I would say. I don't know, just low resolution, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But another later release for the system, not super common. This one also came out on the PS1 as a, I don't know, if not a launch title, a very early title for the system. This game is one of the quirkiest games on this system and probably just about any system out there. This is Panic by Data East. Really, really strange game. Very minimal actual interaction with the game. Essentially, you have choices of buttons to push on each scene, and something wacky happens as a result, sometimes letting you go on to the next level, sometimes making just weird stuff happen. Really strange. I don't know how else to describe it, but you have this little character that you use throughout the game, and you go through museums and historic places, and there's fart jokes, and it's just a very, very quirky Japanese game. So I don't really know if this game has any value today. I've owned this one for a really long time, but if you want something very, very different for your Sega CD, I can definitely recommend Panic. Next one is the most recent Working Designs title that I got for the Sega CD, and this is Popful Mail. This is probably their most difficult game to get for the system of the four, and this one is actually an action RPG, so it's a little bit more up my interest realm than the other ones that are more purely RPG. This one is very difficult. I played it, and I think it's one of those Working Designs games I just cranked the difficulty maybe too high, but it does have a beautiful hand-drawn artwork style to it, and, kind of Zelda 2D style play. So very cool concept of the game. I really like the artwork on it. I will say that they did a nice job with that, with the foil artwork, and definitely a cool game. Glad Working Designs brought this over. Alright, next game is Road Avenger, and this is one of the renovation titles for the system. This was an FMV arcade game by Data East originally, and just a quick time event game, kind of interesting video, very quirky and 80s style to it. Definitely worth a look, especially even if you're not just a renovation fan, and if you're going to play FMV games, this is probably one of the better ones. This is one of the key shooters of the system. This is Robo Aleste. This is essentially the sequel to Musha on the Sega Genesis. It is a lot different than Musha for some reason. Power-ups and overall style will look similar, except it's more of a feudal Japan setting, and there are strange FMV videos added up as cutscenes in between the levels. There is a long and convoluted story to this. I guess it's very historical. But it is a good shooter. It just doesn't have that specialness to it that Musha does for some reason. So I think that's why this one hasn't really taken off in price to the level of Musha, although I've noticed this one is climbing lately. This one was published in the US by Tengen, which is kind of unusual, but definitely nice that it did come here, because there aren't a whole lot of US domestic shooters for the system. Next is one of the classics for the system, I would say. This is Shining Force CD. It's a very well done game by Sega, and the interesting thing about this is this was originally the two Game Gear releases, one of these that we didn't get in the US, that are put together and enhanced for the Sega CD, so it's not an all-new game. But that said, it is very fun, addictive Shining Force gameplay that everyone knows and loves, and like I said earlier, you definitely will need one of these RAM carts if you're going to play this game, because it eats a ton of memory. The interesting thing about this is if you don't have enough memory ready to play this game, it won't even let you boot it, so you can't even just play it and not save. That's not even a choice, so be ready for that. If you do decide to pick this game up, you are going to need memory in addition. This game is Sylphid, and this was I would say it had a lot of hype on it when it came out, but didn't really live up to it. This was developed by Game Arts, who are the same company that made Lunar originally, and it is a on-rail shooter. Kind of has a mix of 2D and 3D style to it. I do like this game, I just don't think it's, deserved the level of hype that it got when it came out, so that's probably why people were disappointed. There is a remake or second game in the series on the PS2 that did come out in the US by Working Designs, if you do like this game, but this one is one of the Sega CD games you can get that's not too expensive. This game, Revengers of Vengeance, I didn't really know what I was buying when I got this game. It's probably one of the more obscure games for the system, I would say. It's a fighting game, and it is pretty much terrible. It does have some cool artwork in it. I do like some of the character designs, but the execution of the game is pretty poor, actually. And I can't remember which Japanese developer came up with this game. It might have been Micronet, so it could actually even be related to Black Hole Assault in some way, but it's not very good. I'd pass on that one. Next is Revenge of the Ninja. This is another one of the renovation titles. This is the only one that came in a jewel case, and this was originally a Taito arcade game on Laserdisc. It is, again, a quick-time event game set in Japan. Has some interesting humor to it. I actually do kind of like this game, and I would say I can recommend it. The artwork on the front with the very 90s comic book style doesn't really fit the game very well, so I'm not really sure what happened with that. But overall, this one's worth taking a look if you like QTE games. Next is Rise of the Dragon, and I do believe this game was developed in France, if I'm not mistaken. It's a cyberpunk thriller, kind of a Snatcher style game, I guess I would say. Not really the greatest game, but also doesn't go for a lot, so it's worth trying if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on a Sega CD game. Did have very mature themes to it, and Came in a few variants too. I believe there's some paper box versions of this too. Next is another disc-only game. This is Championship Soccer 94. Got this very cheap and found out this is another one of the very rare games for the system, but don't really, have any big desire to track down this complete, so this will do for now. Alright, next is the absolute reason why you need to own a Sega CD if I have not convinced you yet. Yes, this game goes for a ton of money. I did not spend a ton of money on this. I've had it for about 15 plus years now, but this is Snatcher, and this game is a masterpiece by Hideo Kojima. It supports the game control pad, it is a digital comic, and it also supports the justifier gun for light gun action scenes. You do not have to use the light gun, but I think it's a cool feature that it lets you do that. Fantastic story, branching paths, lots and lots of secrets, and tributes to Konami's history. Just a classically written story. I really do love this game. I've talked about it before. If you are going to spend a lot of money on a game, to me, this is the one that you should do it on. This game is fantastic. I've beaten it twice. It's not a super long game by any means, but the story is rewarding enough that you want to come back to it and definitely play it again. So, unfortunately, this was a exclusive to the Sega CD in the US. It came out on several different systems in Japan, but if you're looking for a translated version of it, that's pretty much the way to play it. So, definitely a classic game for a reason, and I highly recommend Snatcher for the system. Next is another classic that a lot of people really enjoy on this system. I'm not the biggest Sonic fan, but I can say this game is quality. This is Sonic CD, and it is a nicely enhanced version of the Sonic games on the Genesis. Had a little bit better soundtrack to it, and I think this game is revered for a pretty good reason. And I've got two more games to show, so we're almost at the end here. Thanks for sticking in the longer video. This one is Time Gal. This is the third of the Renovation titles, the last one they released. This one's another paper box game. It was a Taito Laserdisc QTE action game in the arcade originally. As I said about Revenge of the Ninja earlier, this game was kind of closely related to that. Very quirky Japanese storyline, questionable artwork on the front. Seems like we're checking all the boxes here that make it similar to the other one, but definitely a well-worthy addition to your collection. And the last game I have for the Sega CD is Vey or Vi, however you want to say this. I've heard it different ways. This was also another Working Designs game. It's an RPG. I've owned this one for a little bit longer than some of the other ones, and I never really caught on to this one. I don't think this is considered one of the better RPGs for the system, but definitely, another one if you're going for the Working Design set that you need to check off the boxes. There are other games I do want for the system. KO Flying Squadron would be highest among those, but considering the price, that's probably well out of reach from now on. So hopefully you enjoyed my collection. If there's some other stuff on the Sega CD that you like yourself that I don't have, please let me know in the comments. Certainly looking to pick up more games for the system if I'm missing out on something else. And please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought of the video. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon.